Burning Issy, Melvin Burgess, Chapter 18, Part 2. She accused everyone, her mother, her grandmother, her sister, her uncle. There had been a meeting of witches at Melvin Tower after Demdike's arrest, and Jeanette reeled off the names of 20-odd of her neighbours. She named their imps and told their plots, when they had met, where they had met, what they had said and done, whom they had bewitched and whom they had murdered. The clerk scribbled away, trying to keep up with her. Occasionally one of the three men would ask her a question. Jeanette's voice piped on and on. I wondered how many good people like Ahern and Tolly, as well as the Demdikes, would end their lives choking on a rope or rotting in a wet dungeon or crying out at the hands of the witch-finder because of that half an hour of frightened jabber. The three men smiled. Even Parson Holden was pleased with the night's work. At last, no one nodded. "We'll have enough to hammer them all," he said. Now he looked at me. "It's your turn, Issy," said Holden. "The same is true for you." But Baldwin rose to his feet. "You saw what she did," he hissed. "The same applies to Isabel," went on Holden firmly. "The child has committed no crime that carries the death penalty." The witch-finder's face turned so white that his red marks seemed to burn again. "You take the word of a witch? They'll say anything to wriggle off the rope. I know these people. This one sent hellfire to burn me. You were there, Holden. Will you let the devil get away with that?" The magistrate frowned and chewed his lips. He had no wish but to let that man get his hands on me or anyone else, but he believed in the devil, and that I was the devil's agent. Besides, he had his instructions from his masters in Lancaster, men who had given the witch hunter his powers. Perhaps Baldwin was right. Perhaps torture was the only way. "If God is to judge her, he will bring her to him in his own way," said Holden. "I've known Isabel all her life. There's no harm in her unless it was put there by others, and she has committed no crime, unless scarring witch-finder Baldwin off his horse has been made a hanging offence." The witch-finder leaned across the table and jabbed his word at the parson. "Perhaps you're in league with them," he hissed. "You would not be the first witch to hide behind the church's skirts." But now he had gone too far. Noel snapped. "Is that a formal accusation?" The thin man shook his head reluctantly and sat down. "She should hang," he muttered. But the other two men ignored him and turned to me. "Speak, Issy," said Holden. "Tell us about Ahern Star." My tongue felt like clay. I confessed to being a witch myself. I confessed to throwing Baldwin off his horse with the devil's help, but I could not speak against Ahern. Holden glanced at the magistrate. "You know the danger you're in, Issy," he said. "Speak in God's name." I looked at him, and I could see his eyes pleading with me, but I could not speak. "The devil has her," gloated Baldwin. "She cannot properly confess until it has been forced out of her." I saw Holden and Noel glance anxiously at each other. Noel leaned forward and tried once more. "Isabel," he said, "you would be wise to tell us everything now." "I have no wish." He glanced at Baldwin. "I wish you would tell us everything now, Issy." His voice was urgent. He'd seen Baldwin at work. "Please, Issy," he repeated. I looked at him and at Holden, at the witch-finder as well. I felt my soul chill inside me, but I could not betray Iron. Baldwin sighed. She cannot, he said. Parson Holden stood up. I want to speak to her alone for a moment, he said. Perhaps I can convince her. It'll do no good, said the witch-finder. She's Satan's. You'll have to give her to me in the end. Then she deserves every chance to avoid you, replied the magistrate. He nodded at Holden and stood up. Listen to what the parson tells you, Isabel, he told me. He would be happier for you to confess freely. He led the witch-finder outside. The parson came round to the table to sit next to me, as he had in Iron's garden that sunny day. He mopped his face and smiled weakly. Here's a to-do, he said. Some of the things I've seen in these past few days. He shook his head again. You know she's a witch, don't you, Issy? He asked me, and I nodded. Is that why you ran away? I told him how I followed her to the Sabbath, and that I'd seen the devil there. He frowned. I wish you'd left sooner. He paused and chewed his lip. She's here. Did you know that? Iron here. Oh, yes. There was an accusation. An old servant girl of hers, Joan. He nodded his head toward the door and said in a bitter voice, She spent several hours in the company of our friend out there. It took a few moments to sink in. What did he do? I asked. The parson shook his head. Is she alive? She is, just. I don't know how. She's a brave woman, is he? But no one could. His voice trailed off. I'm sorry. I want to see her, I said, standing. You'll let me see her, won't you? He shook his head. Not yet. You must confess first. I shook my head. She confessed, Issy, everything, and she's accused you. Me? She's told us everything. Who you are, what you've done. Don't blame her, Issy. She held out for a long time. Too long. She wanted to give her friends time to get away. Don't you understand? In the end, everyone tells Baldwin exactly what he wants. You too. She did everything she could. I nodded and sat back down. She told me that if they ever caught me, I should tell them everything they wanted to know. I wish she'd followed her own advice. I was there. Baldwin insisted to witness the confession when it came out. He looked down at me. Issy, I want to spare you that. That man. He nodded his head at the door again. He wants revenge for what you did to him. You have to tell. Do you understand? I nodded my head. He was all at an end. Will you confess? He asked eagerly. I nodded. Will she go to hell? I asked. He nodded. I don't believe she will, I said bitterly. She is a good person. Just because she's not a Christian. Just because she's different. Holden nodded. She was a witch, but she has a good at heart. She's good at heart. I hope God will be merciful to her, even though she worshipped a false god. He spoke to her in the past, even though she was still alive, perhaps lying just a couple of meters away from me. I had a sudden thought. She told everything the parson had heard. There was something I had to know. Did she tell you about the Sabbath? I asked. I was remembering what Jeanette had said. I have to know. Was it really the devil I saw? The parson cleared his throat. She told us about the Sabbath, he said. She doesn't call him the devil. According to her, it's an old god, a pagan god who has horns. She told it was the Christians who gave the devil the old god's shape. But certainly it is the devil. This god may visit them in their own minds, But it was not a real monster you saw, Issy. A man dressed up to represent him, usually a friend of hers, someone called Tolly, with a mask, I believe. Parson Holden bent and kissed my cheek before he went out to call the magistrate to hear my confession. End of chapter 18.